Contract to buy and sell real estate. This is the second video in the series going over transaction provisions, starting with Section 5, financing conditions and obligations. 5.1, loan application. The buyer is obligated to provide proof that they have applied for a loan by the loan application deadline, which was provided for them in Section 3. 5.2, loan conditions. It is up to the buyer's discretion whether or not the loan that they are applying for is satisfactory to the buyer. This includes availability, payments, interest rate, conditions, and costs of the new loan. If the buyer cannot find a loan that is satisfactory to them, they do have the right to terminate the contract on or before the loan condition deadline. If the seller does not receive the written notice for the termination, the buyer will lose their earnest money. Also, if they do not provide proof of the loan application before the loan application deadline, they will also lose their earnest money. 5.3 and 5.4 only apply if the buyer is going to be using the seller for financing, such as assuming their loan or seller financing. Section 6, appraisal. If they are doing a conventional loan, the buyer does have the option to terminate the contract if the property is appraised for a lower price than the listing price. A couple other things they can try are seeing if the seller will come down to the appraisal price or coming up with more of a down payment to make up the difference if they will not be able to obtain a loan for higher than the appraised value. Okay, Section 7, evidence of title and association documents. Okay, Section 7 goes over title and association documents. 7.1 refers to title insurance, which is to be furnished by the seller at their expense. You're always going to want to make sure you check this shall box so that the title insurance will delete or insure anything that's going on with the title, anything that would make it a clouded title, such as liens, easements, survey matters, any gap periods or anything like that, any unpaid taxes. And the expense is always going to be paid by the seller. 7.2 talks about homeowners association documents. Those also need to be provided at the seller's expense to the buyer by the record title deadline, which again is in Section 3. And 7.3.1 talks about common interest community disclosure. The owner of the property is required to be a member of the owners association for the community and is subject to any of the bylaws and rules and regulations of the association. So this must be disclosed if it falls in that category. Typically, with the association documents, the seller is going to need to provide them. You can also have the seller authorize the association to provide them. The buyer cannot just call on their own and try and get association documents. They will typically not give them to them. Section 8, record title and off-record title matters. The buyer has the right to review the title and object and terminate the contract based on anything in the title documents that they do not like. That can mean anything. Even if the title is totally clear, the buyer can still state that as a reason for terminating the contract. If there are any off-record title matters, they need to be delivered to the buyer on or before the off-record title deadline, which again was in section 3. If there are any matters that the buyer does object on the title, they can ask for the seller to resolve them before they actually take title, and there is a resolution deadline. If they cannot come to a resolution before the title resolution deadline, the contract will be terminated. 8.4, special taxing districts. If the property falls in a special taxing district, the buyer does have the right to terminate the contract as well, as they cannot opt out of paying the special taxes. Section 9, current survey review. Typically, you're only going to need to do a survey if the buyer is wanting one done, if they think that there's any issues with where the land property is sitting, if they think the neighbor is built on their property, that type of thing, or if your property falls someplace out in the middle of nowhere and it is a good idea for your buyer then to know exactly where their property is and where their property lines are. If there are any objections once the survey has been completed, the buyer does have the right to terminate the contract as long as they do it on or before the survey objection deadline, again in section 3.